The observation deck of the Academy offered a perfect view of the night sky above. Varith Prime 200 trainees had gathered there despite the lockdown, their eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed the desperate situation unfolding in orbit. Kira and his team had been detained by security, but Commandant Sorvan had ordered them brought to the observation deck instead of the holding cells. "You will watch the consequences of your actions," the old Rethke had said, though his tone carried more curiosity than condemnation. The dawning star appeared on sensors as a small dot moving toward the Covenant blockade. Captain Som had somehow convinced 3 other merchant vessels to join her, forming a makeshift rescue fleet that had no business challenging armed terrorists. "This is madness," a Selvari official muttered. "Those merchants will be destroyed, and the Covenant will blame the Academy for escalating the situation." Dasana stood apart from the other Selvari, her eyes never leaving the display. Her sister was on that transport, a 14-year-old girl named Valessa, who had sent her a message just yesterday about how excited she was to see the famous Academy. Now Valessa might die because their species considered their family unworthy of protection. The Covenant cruisers moved to intercept the merchant fleet, weapons powered up, and then something unexpected happened. The dawning star broadcast a message on every open channel, a message that spread across the sector and beyond. "This is Captain Song of the Dawning Star, and we are here to escort the civilian transport to safety. We are not military vessels, and we carry no weapons capable of threatening your ships. But we will not leave these families to die while politicians debate their fate." The Covenant commander responded with threats. Captain Song ignored them. "You may destroy us," she continued, "but the entire galaxy is watching, and every being with a conscience will see what the Purity Covenant truly stands for: the murder of unarmed merchants trying to save children." The merchant fleet continued forward. The Covenant cruisers held their positions, weapons locked on the approaching ships. No one in the observation deck breathed. Then, one by one, the Covenant vessels began to withdraw. The terrorist commander screamed fury over open channels, but his ships were pulling back, unwilling to commit an atrocity that the entire galaxy would witness. Captain Song guided her fleet to the transport and began evacuation procedures. Cheers erupted across the observation deck as families were transferred to the safety of the merchant vessels. Trainees from dozens of species embraced each other, momentarily forgetting ancient rivalries in the flood of relief. The sauna collapsed. Kira caught her before she hit the ground and held her as sobs racked her body, all the fear and tension she had suppressed finally breaking free. "She is safe," he said softly. "Your sister is safe. I do not understand." Dasana wept against his shoulder. "Why did you help me, after everything I said to you? After every insult and humiliation, why did you risk everything for my family?" "Because you are worth helping," Kira said. "And because walls built from pain should not stand forever." She pulled back and looked at him with eyes that held no trace of the cold contempt she had worn like armor since he arrived. "I am sorry," she whispered. "For all of it. I know. You knew before I said it. I hoped." Commandant Sorvan approached them as the celebration continued around the deck. "What you did tonight violated a dozen Academy regulations and could have caused an interstellar incident," he said gravely. Kira straightened to face whatever punishment awaited. "And yet," Sorvan continued, "you somehow convinced 4 merchant captains to risk their lives and their ships, unified a group of trainees from hostile species, and shamed a terrorist organization into backing down without firing a single shot." He reached into his robes and produced a small medallion marked with symbols that Kira did not recognize. "This is the Seal of Threshold," Sorvan said, "given to those who demonstrate exceptional diplomatic potential, and it has not been awarded in 37 years. He pressed the medallion into Kira's hand. "Your grandmother would be proud." Young Yoon. The old Rethke walked away before Kira could respond in the days that followed. The academy returned to its normal routine. But something had fundamentally changed. The Sana no longer sat apart from the other trainees. And though the Salvari nobles still whispered about her family's disgrace, she no longer seemed to hear them. She studied beside Kira in the archives. She joined his strange alliance of misfits and outsiders. She learned to smile without hiding knives behind her teeth one evening, as they walked together through the academy gardens. She stopped beside the fountain where she had once mocked him in front of everyone. "Do you remember what I said to you that first day?" She asked, every word. "I called your species temporary. A flash of chaos in a galaxy that has endured for billions of years." "You did." She turned to face him, her silver skin glowing in the light of the setting suns. "I was wrong," she said. "Humans are not a flash of chaos. You are something far more dangerous." "What is that?" "You are a flame that refuses to go out." She reached out and took his hand. "And you make everyone around you burn a little brighter." Kira smiled that smile she had once found infuriating and now found strangely comforting. "That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said about my species. Do not let it go to your head. I would not dream of it." They stood together in the garden as stars emerged overhead. Two young diplomats from species that could not be more different. Bound now by something stronger than politics or history, in his office high above the courtyard, Commandant Sovan added a final note to Kira Yoon's file. "Subject has demonstrated the human capacity for connection that our analysts have long theorized but rarely observed. And he approaches conflict not as a battle to be won, but as a wound to be healed. Recommend continued monitoring and eventual recruitment to Project Threshold." He paused, then added one more line. "Also recommend pairing with trainee Veor for advanced assignments, as her transformation under his influence suggests potential for unprecedented cross-species partnership." The old Rethke closed the file and allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. Perhaps the galaxy was not quite as broken as he had believed. Perhaps all it needed was someone willing to smile and move closer. The alarm shattered the quiet of the academy at 3 hours past midnight. Kira jolted awake to find red emergency lights flooding his quarters and the calm voice of the security system announcing that all trainees were to shelter in place immediately. "What is happening?" Junwoo burst through the connecting door, still pulling on his uniform before Kira could respond. His personal communicator activated with an urgent message from Tolek. "There has been an attack." The Menish scholar's voice trembled. "A civilian transport in orbit has been seized by the Purity Covenant, and they are threatening to destroy it unless the Concord meets their demands." Kira's blood went cold. The Purity Covenant was a terrorist organization that believed only certain species deserved to exist in the galaxy, and they had been responsible for dozens of massacres across the outer systems. Their attacks followed no logic except hatred. "Who was on the transport?" Kira asked. "Families of academy trainees mostly," Tolek replied. "They were arriving for the mid-year festival next week. But someone must have leaked the passenger manifest to the Covenant." Junwoo grabbed Kira's arm. "The Sana's sister is supposed to be arriving this week, and she mentioned it during one of her performances about how her family still supports her despite everything." They found the Sana in the main courtyard surrounded by a dozen other trainees who had ignored the shelter order. She was standing perfectly still while information scrolled across a holographic display showing the transport ship, surrounded by Covenant vessels. Her face was a mask of ice, but her hands were trembling. "The official response is delayed," a Gorath trainee rumbled. "Political complications between the Concord members about jurisdiction and response protocols. My sister is on that ship," the Sana said, and her voice was flat in a way that spoke of profound shock. She is 14 years old, and she is on that ship. The other Selvari trainees stood nearby, but none of them moved to comfort her. None of them spoke a word of support. Kira pushed through the crowd and stood before the sauna. "We need to do something," he said. "The authorities will handle it," a Selvari male said coldly. "This is not our concern." "Not our concern?" Junwoo's temper flared. "There are children on that transport, and you want to stand here and do nothing? What would you have us do, human? Launch an attack from a diplomatic academy?" Kira ignored the argument and focused on the sauna. "The academy has an emergency communication array that can reach ships in this sector without going through official channels. And if we can contact any vessel willing to help, we might be able to coordinate something before the Covenant makes good on their threats. That array is restricted," Desana said numbly. "Accessing it without authorization would mean expulsion. Your sister is worth more than our careers." Something broke behind Desana's eyes, and the ice cracked to reveal a desperate hope that she had been afraid to feel. "You would risk everything for someone you have never met?" "I would risk everything because she matters to you," Kira said simply. "And because no child should die while adults argue about politics." Desana stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I know the security protocols for the communication center. And if we move quickly, we might reach it before the lockdown seals the corridors." Kira gathered a small team. Junwoo, Tolek, Vrix the Chith, Gurren the Maravel, and two others who volunteered without being asked. Together they slipped through the darkened academy, avoiding security patrols and using maintenance tunnels that Desana had memorized during her first week. "Why do you know these routes?" Kira whispered as they crawled through a ventilation shaft. "Because I always planned for the possibility that I might need to escape," Desana admitted. "When everyone around you considers you tainted, you learn to keep your options open." They reached the communication center to find it guarded by a single automated system that Tolek was able to bypass with surprising skill. "I was not always a scholar," the Menish said when he noticed their stares. "My people have many talents that we do not advertise." Kira took the primary console and began scanning for ships in the area while the Sana monitored security channels and the others kept watch. "There." Junwoo pointed at a signal, a human merchant vessel called the Dawning Star. "They are close enough to reach the transport within an hour." Kira opened the channel and prayed that someone would answer. A gruff voice filled the room. "This is Captain Song of the Dawning Star, and you are broadcasting on an emergency frequency that I do not think you are authorized to use." Captain Song: "My name is Kira Yoon, and I am a trainee at the Diplomatic Academy on Vareth Prime." Kira spoke quickly. "There is a transport in orbit that has been seized by the Purity Covenant, and official response is being delayed by politics. And there are children on board, including family members of my fellow trainees." A long pause. "I am aware of the situation," Captain Song said slowly. "But I am a merchant vessel, not a military ship. And the Covenant has 3 armed cruisers surrounding that transport. I am not asking you to fight them," Kira said. "I am asking you to save whoever you can. And if there is any chance at all, please take it." Another pause. "Longer this time. You said your name is Yoon. Are you related to Admiral Yoon from the Frontier Fleet?" Kira blinked in surprise. "She was my grandmother. She saved my convoy during the siege of Harakan when no one else would come." Captain Song's voice changed, growing harder with resolve. "I owe her a debt I never got to repay. And it seems her grandson is cut from the same cloth." The channel crackled with new activity as Captain Song began issuing orders to her crew. "We will do what we can, Young Yoon, and may fortune favor the bold." The channel closed. The sauna reached out and gripped Kira's arm with fingers that trembled despite her fierce expression. "If this fails, if my sister dies because we interfered with the official response, I will never forgive you." "I know," Kira said. But doing nothing was not an option I could live with. Security alarms began blaring throughout the academy. They had been discovered. But Kira did not move from the console because somewhere in orbit, a merchant captain was risking everything on the word of a stranger. And the least he could do was watch and wait and hope. Kira sat in the academy archive surrounded by holographic texts that floated in the air like luminous butterflies. He had been here for 6 hours, tracing the history of House Var through centuries of Selvari politics. What he found made him understand the Sana in ways he had not expected. House Var had once stood among the greatest of Selvari noble families, their names spoken with reverence in councils across the galaxy. Then came the Border War, a brutal conflict between the Selvari Empire and the Chith Collective that had threatened to destabilize the entire region. While other nobles called for total victory, Lord Vekenvior had negotiated a peace treaty that saved millions of lives, but surrendered territory that the Selvari considered sacred. The treaty held, and the war ended, but the Selvari never forgave him for choosing peace over pride. House Vior fell from grace almost overnight, and their descendants were forever marked as traitors to their own kind, tolerated but never truly accepted. Given positions, but never power, the Sana was fighting against the weight of centuries, and every insult she threw at others was a desperate attempt to prove she was nothing, like the father whose legacy she could never escape. "You have found the truth," said a voice behind him. Kira turned to see the menaced scholar he had met on his first day, a small furry creature with wise eyes named Tolek. "How long have you known?" Kira asked. "Everyone knows," Tolek said sadly. "The Selvari whisper about it when the Sana is not looking, and the other species have learned from observing their hosts. But no one speaks of it openly because that would be impolite. So instead, they let her carry this weight alone. What else can be done?" Tolek climbed onto a nearby chair to bring himself closer to Kira's eye level. "She has built walls around herself that no one can penetrate, and she attacks anyone who gets too close." Kira thought about that for a long moment. "Maybe the walls are not there to keep people out," he said finally. "Maybe they are there because she is afraid of what happens if she lets people in." He left the archives with a new understanding and a plan forming in his mind. The next evening, the academy hosted an informal gathering in the great courtyard where trainees could mingle without the pressure of competition. Kira spotted the Sana standing near a fountain, surrounded by admirers who laughed at her wit while keeping carefully measured distances. She was performing brilliance for an audience that would never see her as an equal. Nearby, 2 groups had formed an increasingly hostile standoff. The insectoid Chith and the amphibian Maravel had ancient grievances that even the Galactic Concord had failed to fully resolve. Their representatives at the Academy had inherited those grievances, along with their diplomatic posts. "This is going to end badly," Junwoo muttered, watching the tension rise. "Maybe," Kira said. "Or maybe not." He walked directly into the space between the 2 groups, and both sides fell silent at the audacity of this human inserting himself into their dispute. "I was hoping to find you both," Kira said cheerfully. "I have been trying to understand why the food synthesizers keep producing meals that taste like recycled starship hull. And I heard that both the Chith and Maravel delegations have filed complaints." The Chith representative, a clicking female named Rix, tilted her triangular head. "You wish to discuss food at a time like this?" "I wish to discuss our shared suffering." Kira sat down on a nearby bench and gestured for others to join him. "Because I have tasted the Academy's attempt at human cuisine, and I am fairly certain it was designed as a form of torture." A surprised clicking sound came from Rix that might have been laughter. "The Chith meals are worse," she said, settling beside him despite the glares from her colleagues. "They somehow made our traditional honey paste taste like engine lubricant." "Engine lubricant would be an improvement over what they serve the Maravel," rumbled the amphibian delegate. A massive creature named Guran, who took a seat on Kira's other side. I believe the synthesizers are actively hostile to all organic life. Within minutes, both groups had abandoned their standoff to share complaints about Academy food, living conditions, and the impossible standards set by their instructors. Old grievances did not disappear, but they faded into the background as a new bond formed over mutual irritation from across the courtyard. Dasana watched with narrowed eyes. She had seen diplomatic techniques from 100 species, but she had never seen anyone diffuse tension by complaining about cafeteria food. It was ridiculous. It was also working unable to contain her curiosity. She waited until the gathering ended, and then followed Kira as he walked alone through the Academy gardens. What was that? She demanded when she caught up to him. Kira turned as if he had been expecting her. What was what? That performance with the Chithan Maravel. Were you trying to mock the art of diplomacy by reducing it to complaints about meals? I was trying to remind them that they have more in common than they have dividing them, Kira said. Sometimes the biggest problems are solved by starting with the smallest ones. That is not how diplomacy works. Maybe not for the Selvari, he agreed. But humans spent thousands of years fighting each other over things far sillier than territorial disputes. And we learned that enemies become friends faster over shared meals than over negotiating tables. The Sana stared at him. Searching for the trick or the manipulation. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. No. She stepped closer, using her height to try to intimidate him. Why are you really here? And what do you want from me? Kira met her gaze without flinching. I want nothing from you. Dasana, everyone wants something. I know about your family, he said quietly. I know about your father and the treaty and what it cost House Vio. She went rigid, her silver skin paling to ash. You know nothing. I know that he saved millions of lives and was punished for it. Kira continued. I know that you have been trying to prove yourself worthy of a society that decided your worth before you were born. And I know that the cruelty you show others is just armor against the cruelty they might show you. How dare you? Her voice shook with rage and something else that she refused to name. You presume to understand me after reading some historical files? I presume nothing, Kira said, and he smiled that gentle smile as he took a step closer to her rather than backing away from her anger. I only know that you are more than what they see, and it seems like no one has told you that in a very long time. Dasana opened her mouth to deliver a cutting response but found that no words would come. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked past her armor to see what lay beneath. You are a fool, she finally managed. Probably, Kira agreed. But fools sometimes see what wise people miss. And I see someone who deserves better than the role she's been forced to play. He bowed slightly and walked away, leaving Dasana standing alone in the garden with tears she refused to let fall burning behind her eyes. For the first time since childhood, she did not know what to do next. 3 weeks passed, and the Sana Vior made certain that Kira Yun knew his place at the bottom of the academy hierarchy. During morning lectures on galactic history, she would ask pointed questions designed to expose the gaps in human knowledge. When the trainees gathered for meals, she would loudly compare human culture to the primitive rituals of pre-spaceflight species. And whenever Kira achieved anything noteworthy, she was there to remind everyone that even a trained animal could perform tricks. Yet through it all, Kira never stopped smiling. I do not understand you, Junwu said one evening as they reviewed their notes in the human dormitory suite. She humiliates you every single day, and you act like she is doing you a favor. She is teaching me about Selvari culture, Kira replied without looking up from his tablet. Every insult reveals what her people value and what they fear. And what have you learned? Kira set down the tablet and considered the question carefully. The Selvari believe they are the natural leaders of the galaxy because their civilization came first. And that belief is both their greatest strength and their deepest weakness. That sounds like something from a philosophy lecture. It is something from watching the sauna, Kira said. She needs to prove herself constantly because somewhere inside her, she is not certain she deserves the status she claims. The next morning brought the first of the academies. Legendary challenge simulations. 100 trainees gathered in the vast chamber beneath the main hall, where holographic technology could create entire worlds in perfect detail. Commandant Sorvan stood before them with his arms clasped behind his back. Today, you will face the fractured alliance scenario, he announced. You will each represent a faction in a crumbling galactic coalition. And your goal is simple: survive and thrive while the galaxy burns around you. The simulation activated, and suddenly, Kira found himself standing in a council chamber, surrounded by alien delegates whose expressions ranged from desperate to predatory. His faction was small, a collection of minor worlds with few resources, but a strategic position between two major powers. The logical move was to ally with whichever major power offered the best terms. Instead, Kira began walking among the other minor factions, listening to their concerns and asking what they needed most. "What are you doing?" hissed the Chith representative beside him, her mandibles clicking with agitation. "The Selvari bloc is gathering allies, and we will be crushed if we do not join a major power soon. Then let us give them something else to worry about," Kira said. He spent the next 2 hours building an unlikely coalition of forgotten factions, each one too small to matter, alone but together representing a significant portion of the galaxy's trade routes. When the major powers finally noticed, they found themselves facing a united front that could not be bullied or bribed into submission. Across the simulation chamber, the Sanavar commanded the Selvari bloc with cold efficiency. She had absorbed 3 minor factions through a combination of promises and threats, and her coalition was growing by the hour. Yet she kept glancing toward Kira's corner of the map, where his ragtag alliance somehow continued to hold together. When she tried to poach one of his allies with an offer of protection, Kira simply walked over to her simulation station. "What do you want, human?" she demanded. "I want to propose a trade agreement between our coalitions," he said calmly. "Your bloc has military strength, but limited access to the outer reach supply routes. And my alliance controls those routes, but lacks the power to defend them. You are suggesting we work together?" Her voice dripped with disbelief. "I am suggesting we stop wasting resources fighting each other when larger threats exist. And when I have what I need, what stops me from destroying your pathetic alliance?" Kira smiled that infuriating smile of his. "Nothing at all. But by then you might have realized that allies are more valuable than subjects." She refused his offer with a contemptuous wave of her hand. But as the simulation continued, her expression grew troubled. Kira's alliance did not fight the way she expected. And rather than meeting aggression with aggression, they simply redirected trade away from hostile factions, letting economic pressure do what military force could not. When the simulation ended 6 hours later, the Zana's bloc had achieved the highest military score, but Kira's alliance had somehow survived intact, despite being outgunned at every turn. Adequate performance, Sorvan announced to the exhausted trainees. "You may rest before tomorrow's challenges." As the others filed out, the Sana cornered Kira near the exit. "You cheated somehow," she said. "No one maintains an alliance that fragile without tricks." "I listened to what each faction actually needed," Kira replied. "And then I helped them get it. That is not strategy. That is just being agreeable." "Maybe," he shrugged. "But we survived, and we did not have to crush anyone to do it." He walked past her toward the dormitories, and for reasons she could not explain, the Sana found herself following at a distance. She watched as he stopped to help a Maravel trainee, who had dropped her data tablets, she watched as he shared a joke with a Gorath guard who had been standing alone for hours. She watched as he treated every creature he encountered as worthy of his time and attention, regardless of their species or status. It made no sense. The galaxy was built on hierarchies and power, on knowing your place and defending it with everything you had. Yet this human moved through the world as if those rules simply did not apply to him. Later that night, the Sana sat alone in the Academy gardens, while the moons of Vareth Prime traced silver paths across the sky. She had spent her entire life preparing for this academy, knowing that her family's disgrace meant she would have to work twice as hard as any other Selvari to earn half the respect. She had armored herself in pride and sharpened her tongue into a weapon because those were the only tools she had. And now, this human was making her question everything she knew about strength and weakness. "You think too loudly," said a voice from the shadows. Commandant Sorvan emerged from between two flowering trees, his ancient body moving with surprising silence. "I was reviewing my performance in the simulation," the Zana said quickly. "You were watching the human," Sorvan corrected. "As you have been watching him since he arrived?" Heat rose to her silver cheeks. "He is a curiosity, nothing more. He is a mirror," the old Rethki said. "And you do not like what you see reflected in him." Before she could respond, Sorvan turned and disappeared back into the gardens, leaving the Sana alone with the weight of his words. She looked up at the moons and wondered for the first time if strength might look different than she had always believed. The shuttle descended through clouds of pale violet as Kira Yoon pressed his face against the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Vareth Prime spread beneath him in waves of silver and green, its famous crystal spires catching the light of twin suns and scattering rainbows across the landscape. He had dreamed of this moment for 7 years. The Galactic Concord Diplomatic Academy accepted only the finest minds from every species in the known galaxy, and in its 3,000-year history, only 2 humans had ever walked its halls. Kira would be the third. "You should sit back," said Junwoo Park from the seat beside him, though his own eyes kept drifting toward the window. "The Selvari delegation is watching us and they already think humans lack dignity." Kira glanced toward the front of the shuttle, where 3 tall figures sat in perfect stillness, their silver skin gleaming and their elongated skulls held high with unmistakable pride. The Selvari had built the first interstellar civilization when humans were still learning to farm wheat, and they never let anyone forget it. "Let them watch," Kira said with a small smile. "I traveled 4 months through deep space to see this view, and I intend to enjoy it." Junwoo shook his head, but could not hide his own grin. The 2 humans had met during the selection trials on Earth and had become fast friends despite their different temperaments. Where Junwoo burned hot and quick to anger, Kira moved through the world like water finding its path around stones. The shuttle landed with barely a whisper, and the doors slid open to reveal a procession of Academy officials waiting on a platform of polished black stone. Kira stepped out into air that smelled of flowers he could not name and felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon him. Representatives from 30 different species had gathered for the opening ceremony, their forms ranging from the insectoid Chith with their clicking mandibles to the massive, stone-skinned Gorath who moved with surprising grace despite their bulk, and standing at the center of the Selvari delegation was the most striking figure Kira had ever seen. She stood nearly 7 feet tall with skin like liquid mercury and eyes that shifted between purple and gold depending on the light. Her robes flowed around her like captured starlight, and when she moved, it was with the precision of a dancer who had trained for centuries. "That is the Sana Vior," whispered a small furry creature beside Kira, a Menish scholar whose name he had not yet learned. daughter of House Vire and supposedly the most brilliant diplomatic mind of her generation. She is beautiful. Kira said simply. The Menish made a sound that might have been a laugh. She is dangerous, human, and she hates your kind more than most. Before Kira could ask what that meant, the commandant of the academy stepped forward to address the gathered trainees. Servan was ancient, even by Rethki standards. His blue-gray skin covered in the ritual, scars of his people, and his 4 eyes clouded with age, but still sharp with intelligence. Welcome to the Galactic Concord Diplomatic Academy. His voice rang out across the platform, translated instantly into every language present. You have been chosen from billions because your governments believe you represent the best of your species. But I tell you now that belief means nothing within these walls. He paused and let his gaze sweep across the crowd. Here you will be tested, broken, and rebuilt into something greater than mere representatives of your homeworlds. And many of you will fail, but those who succeed will shape the future of our galaxy. The speech continued, but Kira found his attention drawn back to the HFY War. She was watching him. No, not watching. Studying the way a predator might study prey, it did not yet consider worth hunting. When Servan finished speaking, the trainees were directed to mingle before the formal dinner that evening. Kira moved through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing himself to everyone he encountered and asking questions about their homeworlds with genuine curiosity. He had just finished a pleasant conversation with a Maravel philosopher when a shadow fell across him. The Sanavaya stood before him, flanked by 2 other Selvari, whose expressions made clear they considered this interaction beneath their dignity. So, the Sana said, and her voice was music wrapped around razor wire. This is the famous human persistence I have heard so much about. Watching you scurry from group to group like a small animal desperate for scraps of attention. The conversations around them grew quiet as others turned to watch. Junwoo started forward, but Kira caught his arm with a gentle squeeze. I am Kira Yoon, he said, offering a slight bow. It is an honor to meet you, Dasana Vior. And I have read your essay on the merchant war negotiations and found it fascinating. Something flickered in her gold-purple eyes. Surprise, perhaps, but it vanished quickly behind contempt. How charming that your species has learned to read, she said. And scattered laughter rose from the watching crowd. Tell me, human, do you truly believe you belong here among civilizations that were building empires when your ancestors were painting on cave walls? I believe I was accepted through the same trials as everyone else, Kira replied, his smile never wavering. A mistake that will soon be corrected. Dasana stepped closer, using her height to tower over him. Your species is temporary, a flash of chaos in a galaxy that has endured for billions of years. And in 1,000 years, no one will even remember your name. Perhaps not, Kira agreed, which seemed to surprise her. But I am here now, and that seems like a good place to start. You should return to your mud world before you embarrass yourself further, she said coldly. This academy has no place for children playing at diplomacy. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the human to crumble or lash out in anger. Kira did neither. He smiled, warm and genuine, and took a step closer to the sauna rather than retreating. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me, he said. I hope we will have many more conversations during our training together, and I look forward to learning what makes your perspective so unique. Then he bowed again and walked away, leaving the Sanavire standing in confused silence. Junwoo caught up with him near the entrance to the dormitory wing. What was that? He demanded. She insulted you in front of everyone and you thanked her for it? She wanted me to react with anger or shame, Kira said thoughtfully, so I gave her neither. But why? Kira paused at the doorway to his assigned quarters and looked back toward the gathering where the sauna still stood, surrounded by admirers, but somehow seeming very much alone. Did you see how the other Selvaria looked at her? He asked. They laughed at her jokes, but they kept their distance. Like she carries something contagious. What does that matter? I am not sure yet, Kira admitted, but I intend to find out from across the courtyard. Commandant Sauvan watched the young human enter his quarters and allowed himself a rare smile. He had seen something in Kira Yoon's application that the selection committee had missed. Something that could not be measured by tests or interviews. He had seen a gift that humans possessed in abundance but rarely. Understood the gift of moving closer when wisdom said to pull away. Interesting, the old Rethki murmured to himself. Very interesting indeed.